Hi guys, so Boris Johnson was challenged today by Sir Keir Starmer, the leader of the opposition, on the number of COVID-19 deaths and also the government's handling of this crisis. So let's hear what they had to say.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the Prime Minister, I know, understands the frustration from those most at risk when they see a report like that and they know action is needed. And action is needed now, not in a few weeks or months. So can I ask the Prime Minister to complete, well, perhaps the Prime Minister will indicate whether that's all of the action or whether there's more action.
I just want to point out something that's not actually related to this the actual content of what Keir Starmer is saying, but look at Keir Starmer's body language and compare it to Boris Johnson. Keir Starmer doesn't look behind him at any stage. He doesn't look to his right or to his left. He looks at the other bench. He looks at the people on the other bench and he focuses on Boris Johnson. Compare that to Boris Johnson's body language. You'll see in a moment.
Serious issue, we can make progress together, but it is important that it's done swiftly for those most at risk. Mr. Speaker, I want to turn to the overall numbers of those that have tragically died from COVID-19, because those overall numbers haunt us. Since last Prime Minister's questions, the government's daily total figure for those that have died from coronavirus has gone past 40,000. The ONS figure, which records cases where coronavirus is on the death certificate, stands at just over 50,000. And the number of excess deaths, which is an awful phrase, stands at over 63,000. These are amongst the highest numbers anywhere in the world. Last week, the Prime Minister said he was proud of the government's record. But there's no pride in those figures, is there?
Mr. Speaker, let me just say that on the death figures for this country, we mourn everyone, and we grieve for them and for their relatives and their friends. But I must also tell him, and he's raised this point repeatedly across.
You see the way Boris, I'll come to what Boris is saying in a moment, but look at the way he looks back at the people behind him. This is one of the reasons why Boris Johnson wants Parliament and Jacob Rees-Mogg want Parliament to refill up, because Boris needs his support. Boris needs his fans behind him, supporting him in his endeavour to respond to a question.
Across the dispatch box, the best scientific evidence and advice is that we must wait until the epidemic has been through its whole cycle in order to draw the relevant international comparisons. And that.
What are you talking about here? So you need to arrive at a stage where 100,000 people have died, and then you can say, okay, now let's compare what we have done with Germany or South Korea or Brazil or the United States. Is when 100,000 people have died, is that when you will say, now it's time to compare what we have done with other countries?
I'm afraid I simply must repeat that point to him. And as for the what this country did to fight the epidemic, I must say I strongly disagree with the way he characterises it. I think
he didn't say what this country has done. He has said what this government has done.
It was an astonishing achievement of the NHS to build the Nightingale hospitals. I think it was.
And see, once again, you see Boris looking over his shoulder, looking at his supporters, trying to get their support. And he's lying again. Keir Starmer wasn't talking about what the country did. He was talking about what you and the government did. Now you're talking about how dare you insult the NHS. Look at what the NHS have done. He's not talking about the NHS. He's talking about the government. Your government. Boris Johnson is attempting to deflect. Oh, look at Keir Starmer criticising the NHS. He's not criticising the NHS. He's criticising you. You're trying to deflect it, and you're using, once again, trying to get some support, looking over your shoulder, looking at your supporters who are in the benches beside you, hoping that they will, cheer you on. It's disgusting.
It's an astonishing thing that this country came together to drive down, to follow the social distancing rules.
Once again, it's not about the country coming together. They followed the rules, apart from your chief advisor. They pretty much followed the rules. You're attempting to say that Keir Starmer is blaming the people, blaming the NHS. No, he's not. He's not actually blaming anyone. He's asking a question. He wants to know why the actions you have taken are having an impact. Why so many people are dying.
In spite of all the doubt that was cast on the advice.
And once again, I'm sorry to be I'm pausing the video every second. He's not even looking at Keir Starmer. He's not looking at the Speaker of the House. He's looking at whom? Who is he looking at in this image? He's looking at his Tory supporters. Why is he not looking at Keir Starmer here? Keir Starmer asked the question. This is what Boris Johnson would have been like in a debate in Eton. He has his support base. He has the opposition, for example. They ask him a question. He doesn't look at them. He doesn't treat them with respect. You know, God forbid Keir Starmer was a member of the SNP. He has complete disregard for the other members of the House who are not members of his party. He won't look them in the eye and answer the questions. He's a bully. I've said this before. He's a bully, and now he has his support base taken away from him, and he's like a frightened child. He won't even look the opposition in the eye.
Advice to follow those rules, to get the number of deaths down, to get the epidemic under control in the way that we have. And this government has announced a plan on May the 11th to get our country back onto its feet, and that is what we are going to.
We have a plan. Is it the same plan that Matt Hancock was talking about? The plan that you're not actually following? Yeah, we have a plan. Theresa May had a plan, I think. Was it Theresa May that had a plan? A plan is worth nothing if you're not following it, if you're not actually doing something. Tens of thousands of people have died because you ignored this problem from the beginning. I've talked about this before. There was a disaster taking place in Italy, and you wouldn't close the borders. You wouldn't implement a quarantine. You wouldn't implement a lockdown. You waited until a Friday, and then you were asking people, please don't go to the pub. Please don't go out with your friends. You have to take responsibility for this, Boris Johnson. Of course you won't. You're trying to deflect. You're trying to ignore the problem and ignore the question and ignore the people who are actually asking the question. It's disgusting, and I hope it's going to end soon. I hope he's no longer Prime Minister, because he's doing damage and he's costing lives. Let me know in the comments, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. This is Boris Johnson like he was probably in Eton. Arrogant and indifferent to anyone who has any sort of challenge to put in front of him. Why not become a Patreon and enjoy access to our Discord server where we share news, chat, and have some fun? If you become a patron, you can also make video suggestions on topics that are important to you. Check it out via the link in the description.